Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm going to pass it off to Amy from SCE to get us started.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Flipping the Switch, helping schools achieve clean energy goals. We're happy to have all of you here today. I first want to thank our partners from New Building Institute, Santa Barbara Unified School District, Orange Unified, and my internal partners at Southern California Edison for being here today and making this webinar possible. So next. So first, I'm going to kick things off with a little safety moment about schools. Obviously, all of you hope you're in a safe location, and certainly if anything comes up, please let us know if anybody needs help on the other side here, since we are in a virtual meeting. I know school's been in session for about a month now, but I think always important to go over the fact that we're all driving into offices and schools are back in session now, and just being really conscious and aware of school buses, watching for school zones, checking those speed limits. There's lots of crosswalks out there with crossing guards in them, and just making sure that you're really aware of your surroundings when these kiddos are crossing streets. Lots of electric bikes and scooters out there now. So just being really well aware of your surroundings. Also making sure that you have got emergency contacts updated for your kiddos at their school, or if they have cell phones, making sure that they're aware of who to get in touch with in emergency as well. And so there's a bunch of other tips there, but just wanted to throw something out there in light of keeping our students safe as we are back to school now. Next. So a couple quick housekeeping. We want to make this as interactive as possible, but we do have a full agenda today. So please feel free to type in any questions in the chat. We will have time at the end for Q&A as well. And just remember to stay muted and cameras off. You can turn back on during the live Q&A. Again, we've got the chat or the Q&A functionality. And just feel free to let us know where you're from, introduce yourself so we kind of know who's with us today so we can kick things off. If I did not properly introduce myself, because I think I was more concerned about everybody else that was joining me today, and lots of you I already know from having worked with you, but to do a proper introduction, I'm Amy from Southern California Edison. Used to work with our school districts really closely. Happy to be continuing the work in our codes and standards space at Edison, and really looking after this to help support the school districts. If you need any support, there's lots of technical assistance resources that I can help you with in terms of developing any kind of policy or model language for your master plan around transportation electrification, building electrification, or any kind of air conditioning to heat pump policies that the school districts are looking to possibly develop. So we look forward to having all of you here with us today. The presentation will be recorded. We will be sharing slides after the presentation. We will also be doing a second workshop on the 8th. It will be a repeat of this. So if any of you have a conflict or have to drop off early, you can always catch the next session as well on the 8th. And then we'll also be doing a survey for follow-up, for feedback on how we can improve and do better, and learn a little bit more about what you guys want to hear more about as we develop other workshops. So thank you again for all being with us today, and we look forward to sharing a robust and fun agenda with you today. And with that, I think, Riley, you're up. Oh, I have the agenda too. Or are you going to do the agenda? I don't know. Either one. Here's the agenda. Go for it.
Great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Riley. I'm an associate director here at New Buildings Institute. I'm all in deep on the schools work. I know many of you. And I'm just sort of the facilitator today. So I have a couple of slides, but then there's a bunch of other folks, as you can see, on our busy agenda. These are our presenters for today. I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves when they get up, because they always do a much better job than me just reading their bio. So just a quick tease about who's joining us today, and then we'll roll into the rest of the stuff. And so I'm going to do just like a real quick level set. Like, I'm going to try and keep this to 5 minutes. Wish me luck. But I just wanted to let everybody know. So most of the stuff here is nationally applicable, but sometimes we will use California for the most part as our sort of role model state. So for context, the average age of our public school infrastructure in California is 49 years old, and that is not that different from nationwide. It's about the same. Whenever I'm in person, I always ask if anybody knows what this car is. And that picture this car as the actual like physical representation of the age of our schools. Right now, they're in sort of a D plus shape. Actually, the update on the infrastructure report card I heard is going to come in the next year or so. So we have a lot of work to do on these buildings. And one of the things that we can do to help impact our buildings and make them healthier, more cost-effective learning spaces is by addressing it with electrification. And fuel choice is one of the great ways that we can do that. It's common in space heating, water heating, and kitchens. And all of our folks, or also electrification or transportation, all of the folks today are going to talk about those different aspects. So electrification is a very, very important strategy. I'm obviously here as an evangelist for electrification, but I really do think it addresses pretty much all of the issues in schools that are around the physical infrastructure. And it's true that it's not exactly always guaranteed to be beneficial or cost less because the approach to doing it matters and is influenced by so many different factors like timing, improvements to adjacent systems like upgrades, occupant, facility manager, all the other folks buy in. There's always something that can sort of slow this down or make it not as effective as a process. But all of our presenters here are going to talk about how best to approach electrification so that we can address things like failing systems, climate adaptation, student health, air quality, rising costs, etc. And just again, sort of a quick visual of the major building elements that can be impacted by electrification. This is obviously a new construction, but a lot of this is applicable to retrofits as well. We've got your major building systems like the HVAC, your water heating, lighting, kitchen, electrical systems, your process loads like plugging in the iPads, things like that, and your control systems. There's also on-site energy generation and storage, and then the actual physical building envelope, the walls, the windows, the doors, etc. And the way that can kind of wind into this electrification puzzle is that the major building systems define the total magnitude of the energy used and the emissions because they're the ones pumping electricity in and out, etc. The building envelope is really important too because it passively impacts your total use. So if your building envelope is really tight, really solid, you need way less of the building systems. And then when you do need some of the building systems, you can meet that demand with the on-site energy generation and your storage. So this is your sort of like perfect little overlap. And the folks today are going to really dive into some of these technologies, but again, just for sort of reference, electrification technologies in schools include things like space conditioning and ventilation, water heating, kitchens and cooking, laundry in some spaces, and transportation. And of course, there are other things that fall kind of under smaller categories, like I said, plugging in the iPads and the process loads. But this is where we're really going to focus in today are these major technologies. Look at that. 4 minutes, not even 5. Andre, I'm going to pass it off to you. And I think all of us presenters could probably go off camera so we can defer to Andre.
Thank you, Riley. Thank you, and good morning to everybody. I think I saw a couple of people out of state, so welcome. Thank you guys for all joining. I'm Andre Saldivar. I'm a senior engineer with Southern California Edison, and I manage our Food Service Technology Center. And we'll go right into the presentation. So why electric? I've been here for 18 years and worked with Amy while she was account manager for our school districts and a few projects with several districts from going all electric to dual fuel and things like that. So why electric? It's more efficient. Sometimes it's 2 to 3 times depending on the actual appliance of it. It's faster, a lot safer, flexible. A lot of school districts and a lot of chains are going because it's plug and play. You can basically plug it, unplug it, and move it around. Some schools are using it in their in the kitchen. Sometimes they're taken to the multi-purpose rooms and even outside for like a pancake breakfast or stuff like that. Upfront is cost on most of the products, less parts, so service and maintenance. There's less things to maintain and service. And then on the induction, which we'll get in a couple of slides later, it provides a cooler kitchen, and the heat that we've been experiencing over the last few summers comes into benefit with some of the schools having summer programs. And then easier to clean. And one of the biggest benefits is probably no hood required. And we'll get in some of that as well. Less space and less ventilation. It's a rule of thumb, it's about 25 to 50% less ventilation on a new build. All right. Again, fast, flexible, modular, efficient, controllable, safe, easy to clean, and low ambient heat to gain. So cooler kitchen, cooler staff, happier staff. Induction is one of the ones that we have. There's ASHRAE studies, there's ventilation studies that prove that that it provides a cooler kitchen. Most of it started front of the house, so we call it buffet or serving. As you've seen this stuff, it's a lot of the countertop equipment here. So from any of the soup wells to single burner or double hobs to holding stations, and it's making advancements into other areas as well. We have a study here. Most schools have buffet serving lines. I've been in some schools that have the line, like as Riley mentioned, since 1950, 60 steam wells. They're very old, very aged. They keep replacing the heating elements, so traditional heating elements with water. Anytime you introduce water into some type of holding, you're going to get lots of problems. And so what we call this holding in induction is kind of dry heat or dry wells. And you can see all the benefits here. No water lines and drains required. They're mobile. You can stack 1, 2, 3 and keep going all the way up to 12 or 15 or 18. And then on the next one, we actually did a study with a large chain where they have both serving in dining and drive-through. And that'll be on our next slide, showing that we replaced, these had anywhere from 18 to 26 wells, all with water. They were getting hit with the health department. As you know, water evaporates. So the holding temperatures were fluctuating. This gave them a consistent standing temperature. Each holding well has its own dedicated thermostat. There's no water, there's no drain lines. There's nothing to drain at the end of the day, nothing to clean. And wipe out or dump out. So here's a study that we did, and it's available, but it's very applicable to all the schools out there. And it gives you more variety too. You can go round, you can go square, different sizes and shapes for your buffet wells. There's also a new technology out there that you can have both cold and hot in the same. So you're not buying a separate 6 wells for refrigeration and cold, holding cold, and then 6 wells for heat. There's some technology out there that has dual. So moving on with the induction, we talked about front of the house and serving lines. Now we're going to show a couple slides of what they're moving into the back of the house, what we considered heavy cooking. As you can see, there's different available options out there with the ranges. So ranges with refrigeration underneath, ranges with ovens, and then ranges with just storage. I know in some facilities, very tight, you might need the oven and the range. Some facilities have more room, so you might want storage underneath, and some facilities want refrigeration. So here's some options that are coming out that are currently out in the market and being used. We'll get into some of these categories. Again, ranges, you could go from 2 burner to 4 to 6 to 8 to 12, as you see. So you can replace a 12 or 6 gas range with induction. This here is a rule of thumb, is not a 1-for-1. With induction, if I'm going from a 6 burner, I can probably get away with a 4 induction hob burner. You can put multiple pans on it, and safe to clean. It has a lot of safety built in it. Each glass has a high temper sensor, so if there was an emergency drill and the staff had to evacuate the kitchen, the glass will sense a high temperature of about 650 and actually will shut off. So a lot of safety built into induction. My favorite part, it's easy to clean. It's a basically nice, simple to wipe down. And there's also rebates per hob there. So right now it's $250 up to $500 per induction hob. The next appliance our stock burners, I see these in schools as well. They're single or double. A lot of the gas pipes are left on, so there's heat in the kitchen all day long. And those pilots can average about 220 degrees just with the standing pilot there. So again, these are very safe. You've got to connect the electric magnetic field. So as soon as you pull off the pot or the pan, it will shut off. Some will beep at you, some will shut off in about 30 seconds or up to a minute. So again, back to safety. It's a very safe product out there. And then the next is pizza ovens. They're, they give you multiple decks, so you can do multiple different items and temperatures. So you can set the top deck for like 650, the medium deck to like 550, and the bottom deck to like 450, and do different products. You can do cookies and pizzas and things like that. Capacity, large volume. You can turn these on in the morning, turn them off at night. They take about 45 minutes to 30 minutes to get up to that high temperature. Very well insulated. So another piece of equipment that's cools the kitchen here. And the rebate's about $1,500 per deck. So this is a growing market that we're seeing. If any of the school districts are interested in a pizza program or anything like that. Moving on. So as I mentioned, the benefits and some of the bullet points is electric is a ventless advantage. And so most of the rule of thumb right now is kind of two pieces that you're or allowed to have ventless. So I would say most of your guys' read therms, hot food holding cabinets don't require a hood. Some schools have, where they just reheat and read therm. So you've got a couple of those cabinets and a couple of the read therm cabinets. So that's probably the biggest advantage. And again, I've seen schools now with the ventless equipment being able to move it into the multi-purpose room or move it out to different areas where they have the power available to do special events. Moving on. So again, this is just showing that, the current requirements. As you can see, some of the equipment that is excluded. Action ovens, as you see, under 12 kW, and then there's a read therm for 250. As long as the read therm doesn't max temperature 250, most schools. So there's kind of a California school read therm oven out there that they'll max out the temperature 250. As you see highlighted there, most of them allow you guys with 2 units without a hood. There are some instances where they'll allow more than that, but you have to work with your local jurisdiction. And then we'll get right into some of the ventless. So you can double stack ovens. Most hoods are historic, as Riley mentioned, in some of the school districts. There's not much space left under the hoods. So some of this is allowed, as you saw in all of the convenience stores that you put gas in. A lot of this is out there on the counter. The next slide will show some of the ovens and combination ovens that are being in the school districts. They're double stacking them. They're actually sticking them right outside the hood because they have a ventless or some type of hood there. So with electric, you're allowed to do this. You're allowed to double stack either a convection oven or a combination oven or any type of oven and put this ventless or recirculating hood. Now there is some heat that will return to the space, but that will help. We will help you design, what's the perfect ventilation to add this. So this is kind of, hey, if I am got no more space, my hoods are open.
It looks like we might have lost Andre for a second.
It does look like he dropped off. Riley, do you, until he joins back, because I'm not seeing him on here right now.
Maybe we'll just come back to his and move to Desmond, or give him a minute.
What is left, because I know a lot of these slides were more informational and resource, I think, just kind of showing some variation in some of the options of the ventless options. So maybe we can kind of continue to scroll
Maybe
There
you can
are,
cover this one.
yeah, I can talk through this. So on the Edison website for any one that is an SE customer, there is a program where there are incentives and rebates available. Most of them are passed on through the manufacturer itself. He has the website listed below. So there is also a link on the SCE site under our third-party programs as well that are extremely helpful. So I think we can go to the next slide. Let's see what else he's got in here and we can kind of walk through these. So our Food Technology Center is available to anybody that's interested in coming up here. We've had several school districts utilize the Food Technology Center to come and actually test out some of the cooktops and the ovens and actually utilize particular options that you're maybe concerned about, cooking pizzas or making hamburgers or whatever it might be, and you can actually utilize the Food Technology Center for that purpose. We've had schools come up specifically for their own cafeterias that they've wanted to test equipment for. We've also had a couple of school districts come up and utilize the facility as well for the development of culinary classrooms for programs that they were going to be developing as well. So Andre and his team are a plethora of resources and tools, both in person, online, through webinars. So there's a ton of opportunities for us to be able to help support you in the decision-making process of potentially electrifying your kitchen appliances. Let's go to the next slide and see what he has. So again, this talks a little bit more about how to get to the sce.com/FTC. So I think this will be available to you when we send out the packet. So if anybody has any other questions or wants to kind of come up and give the Food Technology Center a try, we have a couple schools in our area too that are being either completely remodeled and built from the ground up, and they brought their architectural and design teams up as well to view the equipment and test things out. So there's a plethora of options and visitors that are welcome in that facility. There is also a tool lending library, and so this will give you access if you're interested in giving any of the induction stovetop a try. There's a single burner that is able to be lent out for 2 weeks, and will give you a good opportunity to be able to try it either for yourself or in your home, or certainly for business purposes as well. And then again, Andre's just included a bunch of the different tools that are available in the lending library for as they relate to electrification with appliances. And just in case some are not aware, when you go to use the induction cooktops, I think one of the complaints people were originally getting was things not cooking properly, but there is special pots and pans that need to be utilized. And so you'll see one of the cast iron pans included to be able to be part of that lending tool program as well. And so you can choose which variety of options you want to rent out for that 2-week period. And then there's all of Andre's information there, along with the other resources that he included in his slides prior.
I think that's it. We call that hop ride. Way to go, Amy.
Hey, we just got to jump in.
I love it. All right. Thank you so much. And Andre, if you joined back, thank you for the earlier slides. We really appreciate it. I'm going to pass this off to Desmond from Santa Barbara Unified, who's going to give us a little bit of an overview of what this looks like in a school district. So go for it, Desmond.
Hello, everybody. My name is Desmond Ho, and I am the Operations and Sustainability Coordinator, as well as the Project Manager for Santa Barbara Unified School District. Thank you, Riley, for handing us over and having us me on this presentation. So next slide. My presentation today, I'll be talking about the inspiration behind our solar microgrid project, how we designed it, the use of a power purchase agreement, and how this project drives our building electrification process. Next slide, please. So our school district is a school district with 12 elementary schools, 4 junior high schools, 5 high schools, with 3 of those being traditional high schools. And we have approximately 13,000 students, with a little bit more than half of our students on free and reduced price meal. We have about 1,600 staff, and most of our buildings were built in the 1920s and the 1960s. Being a coastal district, less than 20% of our classrooms have air conditioning. In fact, only about a quarter of our classrooms only have windows and doors as the sole source of ventilation, because those 1920s era buildings are on a boiler and radiant heater system, so no HVAC at all in the classrooms. Next slide. So Santa Barbara is in a part of California that goes east-west, and we actually rely on our neighboring county for electricity. And some of those power lines actually run through the wilderness of a national forest, or Los Padres National Forest, to our north there in the green. We have had fires, such as the Thomas Fire of 2017, that came close to disrupting the power distribution system. And due to how remote some of these areas are, it could potentially take Edison a long time to repair the damage, depending on how extensive it is. Next slide. So here is a little CAL FIRE map to look at the decades of fire activity in our county here. So in the kind of darker green, if you will, we have the 1980s. The yellow, we have the 1990s. And then we have the 2000s. And then red, we have the 2010s. And then the purple, the last one is the 2020s so far. So as you can see, we are very fire prone, and we have a lot of fires that happen a lot historically. Next slide, please. So thinking about community resiliency with our fire risk, Santa Barbara Unified School sites have served as emergency shelters during natural disasters, and our microgrids powering the largest kitchens, gyms, and multi-purpose rooms, we have the ability to help feed and shelter the community when there is a need. This was the case during the Thomas Fire in 2017, and then the subsequent mudslide that happened two months after that in 2018, and the flooding that occurred in 2023 of January. So the picture that you're seeing here is our freeway going north and southbound, and when this floods, it pretty much cuts us off of most supplies that come from neighboring counties from the south. Therefore, we believe that our microgrid system will better position our district to help our students, their families, and the community with the increasing frequency of disasters from climate change. Next slide, please. So because of these close calls in 2017 and also having a better understanding of our vulnerability, our school district decided in 2019 to begin exploring the installation of solar, and more importantly, pairing the solar with battery storage system that incorporates smart load controls, or commonly referred to as a behind the grid microgrid. With the completion of the design, we figured that we were going to have it at 14 sites, with 6 of these sites having the microgrid that I spoke about. So the targeted area for our solar were parking lots where it's feasible for the high schools and junior highs, and play fields for shading in the elementary schools. With the age and condition of our schools, just rooftop installation was not going to be feasible, because we had to redo and redesign a lot of our roofs because of how old they are. So this project provides 70% of our district's overall electricity use, offsets about 93% of greenhouse gas emissions from utility electricity use. And the 6 microgrids were located at our 3 traditional high schools where there's the highest usage, 1 junior high for resiliency, our district office where the central communication equipment is housed, and also our warehouse where all of our food is stored. Next slide, please. So how are microgrids different than just a solar hooked up to with battery? So microgrids have smart controllers that looks at available power, battery power, current power demands, current solar availability, and switches things on and off based on their predetermined tiers. So the model that we use have 3 tiers. Tier 1 are the critical loads. So those are going to be the walk-in refrigerators and freezers, as well as the central district office communication equipment. So we expect that to be 100% up resilience, or going to be on 100% of the time. And then depending on availability, multi-purpose rooms, gyms, and site communication equipment, we're expecting about an 80% uptime. And then finally, the remainder of the school will be powered 25% of the time. Now, a lot of times when we do have power outages, it is fairly short and in the middle of the day. And when that happens, these batteries are able to power the school without any sort of disruption. So the school is none the wiser to any sort of power outage. Next slide, please. So how was this financed? We did not have the upfront capital to pay for the installation of this project, so we decided to go with a power purchase agreement, or a PPA. Basically, with that, we pay our provider a flat, non-escalating rate for 28 years for power. We knew that there's going to be construction change order costs, consultant fees, legal fees with this project. So we actually negotiated a slightly higher PPA rate, and in return, the contractor gave us a $1.2 million contingency fund to pay for any unexpected things for this project. We also baked in a performance guarantee where they had to provide, I believe, 98% of what they said that they would. And originally, it is anticipated that we were going to save about $7.7 million before or over the life of this project. But this was before all the COVID electricity rate hikes. So we have updated that to now be $14 million because of the new rates. Next slide, please. So with the introduction of solar and battery storage, it now totally makes sense for us to start phasing out natural gas equipment at our school sites. So one of the first and easier things to switch out have been our natural gas water heaters. There are many incentives for swapping out natural gas water heaters and installing heat pump water heaters. And as a district, we've pretty much have had all these installed for free. And we started off by phasing out two 500,000 BTU boilers that were original to two of the schools in the 1960s that still functioned, but were on its last legs. And then next, we targeted 100-gallon water heaters since those get the most use. And initially, we were doing a 2-to-1 replacement. So for every 100-gallon water heater that we were replacing, we were installing two 120-gallon heat pump water heaters to make sure that we wanted to make sure that we kept up with the demands of the kitchens and showers. However, we found that to be overkill. So for our district, we've been doing a 1-to-1 replacement with a small storage tank on the side, and this is sufficient in most cases. We have about 40 of these installed throughout the districts, and the first batch were installed 3 years ago. None of them, except for one, which had a manufacturing defect, have had any issues, and the users have reported no difference in hot water availability, which is exactly what I wanted to hear. Our district also decided to phase in the installation of these so that 10, 15 years down the line, when these need replacing, we're not doing them all at once. So one benefit, and also could potentially be a problem, is that most of the rooms that these water heaters were installed in have little to no ventilation, and heat pump water heaters actually discharge really cold air. So some of the rooms actually got too cold, and the heaters would have to defrost and not work efficiently. So make sure you install either some intake or exhaust fans in these small rooms, or if you have the ability to pipe this room into an adjacent room, such as a kitchen, the staff there would be very thankful for those efforts. Next slide. Another area that we're targeting is going to be our HVAC systems. So as I mentioned, our district has less than 20% AC in our classroom. And most of the ACs that we do have are portable classrooms with wall mounts. So with a lot of our furnaces requiring replacement, we're spending the money to go towards heat pumps. Even though we're a coastal district, we're seeing more and more days where it's 80+ degrees in our classrooms, and that's counterproductive to student learning. So a couple of years ago, we had 3 wings of a high school whose 1960s era furnace finally gave out. So instead of replacing like for like, we spent double the money and went with heat pumps. And having the solar definitely helped make that happen. So one small issue that we encounter is that teachers are so used to having windows and doors open. The shift to having them close it's been very difficult. So we've been installing door and window switches that work with the HVAC controls to turn off the compressor or heating coils if the doors and windows are left open. Next slide. So, previous slide, please. So one thing that I want to mention is that a lot of our schools historically just have very little power draw because of natural gas availability. So if you're going to electrify, make sure you get SCE involved early because they have a lot of customers, and getting new service or upgraded service to your school or site is going to take some time. Make sure you account for that extra money that you're going to need to pay for that upgraded service. So for instance, we have a $6 million HVAC upgrade grant And unfortunately, we're going to need new electrical service at 2 of our sites. So we're going to have to spend some of our bond money to upgrade the service. So account for that and make sure you read any sort of grants that you get to see if they pay for electrical upgrades. So some do and some don't. So lastly, what's next for us? We're going to start electrifying our kitchen. So we're looking for a pilot kitchen that we can try to do this work. All right. Next slide. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry I went a little bit over.
You crushed it. Thank you so much, Desmond. All right, Ramiro, you're up.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ramiro Lepe. I'm the Senior Advisor representing Southern California Edison's low to no cost EV infrastructure installation pathway, also known as Charge Ready Transport. Guys, a little bit about me. I come from the industry, so I used to run a rental operation for Peterbilt for many, many years. So I say that to start off by saying I'm not really a utility person. I happen to just be here just a little bit over 3 years, but really want to make sure that you guys understand that I understand your challenges. When you're looking at the transition to electric, you want to make sure that we make this transition for you as seamless as we possibly can. So with that, welcome to the fleet electrification portion of today's event. So school districts, I know there's quite a bit of school districts. I recognize a lot of the names in the group. If you are considering transitioning your fleet to electric, there's probably a lot of items that are on your mind. And you may be wondering, what does it actually take to offset the cost of installing commercial EV infrastructure? Or quite possibly, how can I access the technical assistance that will provide the guidance and necessary to make this transition a reality? And I know with the way the budget crisis is today, you're probably looking at what EV grants, resources, and offsets that will actually help you make the transition an actual reality. So, right, we go to the next slide, please. Or it's quite possible that you may be wondering and thinking, where do I even begin? Now, guys, in this portion of the presentation, I want to make sure you guys know this fleet electrification session is all about you, all about your goals. And when you work with us at Southern California Edison, we really try to figure out upfront where you're at in terms of fleet electrification, what your goals are, and then it's our job to help you build a bridge as to how to get there through our various transportation electrification pathways. So definitely keep this interactive, ask questions in the chat, and I'll certainly pause along the way to make sure that we are addressing any questions or concerns that you may have. So with that, another item that you may be questioning right now and wondering is how exactly do we work with SCE for our power needs? Specifically, now I'm talking about fleet electrification, but this would actually suffice to any particular electrification project that you may have going on at your district. All right, guys, so if you take anything away from what I'm about to share with you over the next 12 minutes, know that every EV infrastructure installation pathway program is a major construction endeavor. So with that, we'd like for you to consider Southern California Edison as a partner. And what we have is we have a variety of different first points of contact. For example, dedicated account managers, like probably about 90% of all school districts in our service area have a dedicated point of contact. Those that don't have individuals like myself on the e-mobility team that they could always rely on, and we're going to be here to support you guys. We have a variety of transportation electrification advisory services. So all things from webinars, in-person events. We're doing a free ZEB transition plan here for school districts in the next couple of weeks. All that to lead us over to all of our various programs to help you offset and support the cost of transitioning to electric. So that we go to the next slide, Riley. So really, we have something to support you at every stage of your journey. So we mentioned how we want to figure out where you're at in the process, where you want to go, and we want to inject you and really into the right program at the right time. And really what that is a discovery to figure out which one of our programs and self-service tools could help you electrify. So all things in the early stage of the transition, we have things from total cost of ownership tools. We have EV funding tools to help you figure out what that cost would look like. So electricity versus diesel or gasoline, for example, all the way out to what types of grants, resources, and incentives you qualify for. All the way out to figuring out, well, how much power exactly is on our site. We actually have a free resource, which in 5 clicks or less, you get an estimate as to how much power is available to your local circuit, your local, site. If you wanted to validate that information, we also have a paid capacity study that you could do. And then from there, we start transitioning into the actual infrastructure installation pathways. So if you want to go to the next slide. So with that, I'd like to share with you guys one self-service tool, one program, and also one resource is going to help you transition to electric. So starting off with a self-service tool. So if you go to tcocalculator.sce.com, and once again, guys, this will all be emailed to you, you could actually figure out the potential cost, the total cost of ownership of the transition to electric. On here, you could input white fleet, so whether that's a Ford F-150 Lightning or a Chevy Silverado, all the way out to Type D school bus. Put your route parameters into it, how much you're currently paying for combustible, and it would actually give you the estimate of total cost of ownership to include the rate structures as well as the EV itself based on the life cycle. So pretty cool tool. And what it will also do, it will help you figure out what incentives are currently available today. And I know in today's climate, incentives and helping offset that cost is crucial because we know that total cost of ownership is only achieved with the right amount of resources to help you offset that cost. Next slide, Riley. All right, guys. And as we start progressing through the program, we do have what we call the low to no cost EV infrastructure installation program by the name of Charge Ready Transport. And this is a program that I will kind of double click on just a bit here. So this particular program, it can help you support the cost of the transition up to a 10-year deployment strategy. So the way that this works is that for the purchase or lease of any one qualifying asset, we would allot you one charging port as part of the process. So a qualifying asset in terms of SCE Charge Ready Transport would be anything that is a Class 2 all the way to a Class 8 100% electric vehicle, or offered vehicles such as TRU infrastructure. If you were doing skid steers, backhoes, etc., that were also electric, those would also qualify into this particular program. Now, with this program, what we would do is we would do all the distribution to meter upgrades and then give you two options on your side of the meter infrastructure to help support that cost. Now, we'll mention that this particular program, as of today, is going through the end of next year. So the way that this would work, your agreement into the program, which historically takes about 6 months to get you there, would have to be fully executed by December 31st of 2026. Meaning that unless we don't receive an extension, your program application deadline is going to be right around June or July of next year. So if you are looking to transition white or yellow fleet, I highly, highly recommend meeting with us and figuring out if this might be the right resource for you. So if you go to the next slide, Riley. All right, team. So we mentioned how this particular program will install the infrastructure from distribution to meter and then give you two options on your side of the meter infrastructure. So if you direct your attention, please, to the left side of the screen where you see the SCE build, that's the one with the infrastructure all in yellow. So that is actually what we call the SCE build option. So under this particular option, we will cover all distribution and meter. So think power lines up into that brand new separate meter. And then what's really unique about the program is we will actually come onto your side of the property, install the panel switchgear, run all the trench, all the wiring, all the cable, all the way out to the first point of connection between the charging station and the physical infrastructure. So under this scenario, your school district, you'd only be responsible for the purchase or lease of the EV, purchase of the charging station, installation and permitting of the charging station. We cover everything else. So the actual engineering, all the site planning, the construction, procurement, that is all covered under Charge Ready Transport. Now, on the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a customer build pathway. So let's say you wanted to add some advanced bells and whistles, as I call them. So you want to add energy storage, you want to have solar, potentially V2G technology some point in the future, and you want to have that option to be able to interconnect that third-party resource to the grid. Then at that point, you could actually embark on the customer build option, which we would still do distribution and meter, same as we would have done on the SCE build option, with the variance that anything on the customer side of the meter would be full responsibility of the customer using IBEW union labor. Now, the advantage to this particular pathway is that we would rebate up to 80% of the project cost for you embarking on that journey. Now, you guys may be wondering, what I mean, this is all great, but why would we do SCE built versus customer built, or possibly vice versa? And really, guys, what I found is that there's three main scenarios to consider as you're looking at potentially transitioning each of these. So we look at the SCE built option. It is a lot more attractive because we are essentially doing both sides of the meter work for you. Less headaches, less resources expended. But one item that I will mention is that if you look at the infrastructure pathway, we are installing Edison structures further into your facility, which a lot of entities do view that as a value add. But what that does require, it does require a utility access easements that does not allow for any red line revisions. Now, I can certainly send you guys a copy of that, and I definitely recommend sending out to your legal departments, the board, etc., as soon as you're looking at potentially embark on this journey. But I have had scenarios where some districts are easement sensitive, and in that case, the customer built option would provide you a resource where we would only go up an easement, because it still will require an easement, but we would only go up to the meter and panel. So I've literally had districts choose that option specifically for that. The next item as to why one district would choose one versus the other would be the conversation of integrating distributed energy resources. So the SCE built option, that would preclude you from ever being able to interconnect any type of technology. We'll use solar as an example, to this specific meter and panel that we're installing for you. Now, anywhere else in the building, on the facility, that's a whole different conversation. We're just talking about the infrastructure installation that we're installing as part of the charge-ready transport build-out. If you want to have the option, but not the obligation to be able to interconnect solar, whether that's at time of construction, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, the pathway would be that you would pick the customer built option. And when you are ready to interconnect, there is what we call the Rule 21 interconnection agreement that you'd have to complete. And at that point, you are able to interconnect that third-party technology to the infrastructure. Now, the third item as to why one would choose one versus the other is that under the SCE built, and we'll use the example that you're transitioning over, we'll just say 10 electric school buses. We'll say it's 500 kilowatts of power. What would end up happening under SCE built option is we would actually build out the entire infrastructure on both sides of the meter to support whatever's on your application. So in the conversation of future proofing, or let's just say plain and simple, you wanted to scoot the chargers back by 6 feet. This is actually a real world example. The SCE built infrastructure option would be a little bit more restrictive, because in that sense, we would only build up to whatever's on your application, and there'd be no alterations allowed to that infrastructure in perpetuity. So in other words, scooting back that charger by 6 feet, it would be unpermissible through this SCE built option. Now, the customer built option, however, this option is optimal if your district is looking at multi-phase projects, or plain and simply, you're still unsure what that future may look like and you want to have the option, but not the obligation to be able to future-proof. So under the the customer built option, there is an ability where, although in our example of the school buses, the 5 school buses, you might be able to build it out on your side of the meter for 10, and who's to say on our side we couldn't do some of the civil improvements up front to help you for a larger deployment. So those are some variances. Now, this would induce a conversation for us to have between ourselves to figure out what the district's plans are, what the best route of attack would be to make sure that we're getting you on the best pathway possible for your particular projects. And we'll go to the next slide, please. All right, guys. Now, you might be wondering, well, Ramiro, how long does all of this take? Well, on average, you are looking at about 1.5 to 2 years from date of application until the time the actual infrastructure is in the ground. Now, with that, at the beginning of the conversation, I mentioned how this is a major construction endeavor, and there's a lot of items that could occur that could potentially impact your timeline. So yes, engagement that's early, engagement that's often is highly important, but what that really means, there's a lot of things that could potentially go wrong in this project, such as site characteristics. It could be power capacity. It could be getting an easement. It could be getting a permit from the local area having jurisdiction. So you really want to give yourself as much lead time as you possibly can to ensure that you don't get into a scenario where you have an electric bus on the ground and no feasible way to charge it. All right, if you want to skip 2 slides, please. All right, so as you're looking at this, and we go to the next slide, please. Know that if you still have questions and have no idea where to start, which a lot of the districts that I deal with are in that particular scenario, we do have an EV readiness study that we provide to you. Now, there is no cost for this whatsoever, and this is really built to help you determine the feasibility of the transition to electric. So I highly recommend, if any of you are interested or tinkering around with electrification, this is a great resource, great place to start, and one that we can commence the conversation of figuring out if this is the right choice for you guys. We'll go to the next slide, please. All right, so here is my contact information. Should you have any questions, I know we ran through an hour presentation, about 50 minutes flat here, but if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, please reach out to me directly, or your SE account manager will be sure to get you guys taken care of. All right, Riley, back to you.
I loved the energy of that, and that was such an impressive way to stay on time. I loved it. Lots of good information, and I know there's some questions in the chat, and we'll definitely come back to some of them too if you want to talk about them a little bit more. I'm gonna pass it off to Christina. Take it away to give us the down and dirty about buses in your school district.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I'm happy to be here. My name is Christina Celeste Russo. I'm the Director of Transportation and Mechanical Services for Orange Unified School District in beautiful Orange, California. So let's talk about why electric vehicles. So next slide, please. So in transitioning to electric vehicles for our district, it was very important to consider a few different things. Initially, we moved forward on the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Fund grant that came out, and we applied for 7 school buses to be transitioned over to electric. Our district, it's been many, many years since we've actually had replacement funding for school buses. So taking advantage of that incentive with grant funding and knowing that we could potentially have those additional credits available to us if we were to transition was the first step that we really considered. Our district is also located in the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and we are unable to purchase diesel vehicles in our air quality district for many, many years now. So alternative fuels is our only option. So when zero emission vehicles came out, we definitely saw the benefit with a cleaner environment and seeing those potential opportunities for reduced fuel and maintenance cost, as well as helping to change emissions regulations in our industry. Next slide, please. So our overall fleet electrification overview is we have 120 buses in our fleet today, and currently 17 of them are electric vehicles. We have 17 more on order, so we will soon have 34 electric vehicles in our fleet. We have phased out or working to phase out all of our diesel buses and starting to transition some of our petroleum gasoline special education buses that we use. So we have completely finished phase 1 of our project. That phase had 15 Bluebird 40-foot transit buses. And with that, we worked with Edison on a charge-ready transport program, and we were able to get 15 19.2 kilowatt chargers. So those are level 2, essentially equivalent to, in our industry, some will refer to them as slow chargers and fast chargers. So we have 15 of the 19.2 level 2s, which would be considered slow chargers from phase 1. That phase actually took us some time to complete. It was actually handled through COVID, so there were some delays with switch gears and transformer items that were needed for that project. So we did have a situation, like Ramiro had previously said, you want to start early. We did find ourselves in a situation where we had buses already on site for about a year before we actually had the infrastructure to be able to charge those buses. So when we knew that we were going to acquire additional vehicles, we knew we needed to start much earlier for phase 2. So we are currently in the progress in finishing phase 2. There is a slight holdup with a new circuit breaker that was needed to actually power some fast chargers that we now have part of that phase. That was to get some additional 40-foot transits, as well as some microbird G5s, which are to replace some of our special ed gasoline vehicles. So for phase 2, we have 16 chargers total, 13 of which are still level 2 19.2 kilowatt chargers, and 3 of them that are now fast chargers, 60 kilowatts. And then we are already working on phase 3. So we recently got approved for EPA grant funding, and we know that with that funding coming and with those additional 17 buses on their way, that we were definitely going to have to consider a phase 3 project. And so for phase 3, we actually are getting all fast chargers, a mix of 60 kilowatt chargers as well as 160 kilowatt chargers. So the difference, the 19.2 kilowatt chargers can charge a bus from no charge to a full charge within an 8-hour period. Our 60 kilowatt chargers we're seeing within a 2-hour period, you can get a full charge to a bus. So when we actually get those 160 kilowatt chargers, we're hoping to see a full charge within an hour. So we started early with that, and we're currently in the program agreement, and hopefully within the next few months we can start construction. Next slide, please. So when you are looking to transition, you definitely have to consider what is the feasibility of transitioning your fleet to electric. So some key points would be, what's the cost impact? Electric vehicles and infrastructure can have a lot of upfront cost and investment opportunities to the district. But with that, you need to know what are the savings over time that's going to offset those costs. You have to consider the operational readiness. What's the range on these buses? What's the charging time? And the availability of the stations that you're going to have available to support your daily operations. You have to consider those environmental benefits. Transitioning obviously helps to reduce the emissions overall within your community. It provides a much quieter and safer ride for the students. These buses are extremely quiet. Over time, as we've gotten additional buses in different phases of our acquisition, we've actually noticed that they've created a louder humming sound to the buses just to make them more visible to the public at school sites or even on the road. So that way people are more aware of the fact that electric buses are surrounding them. What are some policy and funding opportunities that you have available to you? And what's the long-term sustainability efforts that your district is going to see? Lower maintenance, fuel independence, as well as alignment with the climate goals. Next slide. All right, so some key steps for successful transition. Obviously, you have your comprehensive fleet assessment. You need to really begin with a clear picture of where you are today in your fleet, where you're going to need to go. Check the age of your fleet, the mileage, what are your fuel types that you're currently using, and your overall maintenance costs, and how can you create like an effective replacement cycle. You want to definitely identify those benchmarks with peer districts and organizations. You really want to engage your stakeholders. When we first actually started transitioning, we went to district advisory council meetings. We spoke to parents, we spoke to school sites, as well as students, outside partners like our air quality district, SoCal Edison, as well as our neighboring districts, to really understand that overall engagement and partnership and how this would benefit everyone in the industry, and what were any of the concerns that those stakeholders thought going into this. You want to consider, what is your target goal with transitioning your fleet? Do you want to be 25% within the next 10 years? Does your air quality district support that? Do CARB regulations support that? And consider really, what are you doing to help reduce those emissions and the overall fuel cost? And those infrastructure milestones are also really, really important. When you are working with the phased approach, you really need to consider multiple avenues, as well as your training and your support programs, and really identifying what is going to be needed. Operating these buses is a lot different than operating internal combustion engines. So what kind of programs are you going to need to implement for your mechanics, for your drivers, the proficiency? What are the expectations outside of the warranty programs that are going to be available and offered to you? And how can you really start that transition and making everyone feel comfort early on in the process? Because obviously change can be a little bit impactful to most. Next slide. All right, so this is our current infrastructure and installment layout. So from the picture all the way on the left of your screen, we actually started our phase 1 of the first 15 charging stations on the west end of our yard. And for phase 2, we actually continued down that line for the 13 level 2 and the 3 level 3 chargers. We actually, you can see exactly on these pictures where they have identified the transformer, the switch gear, and how everything was situated. Working with Edison, they helped to upgrade utilities. You'll have grant easements and various other things that may or may not pertain to your specific installation project. Next slide. This is our phase 3. So when we work with Edison, we actually always provide 3 options of where we would like to see infrastructure take place. And then obviously Edison will come out and do surveys of the property and identify what would be the most cost effective and efficient for them to also complete the infrastructure project. So we actually Edison was able to help us support our option 1. So we are moving forward with option 1, which was confirmed by Edison for us to get 10 additional charging stations, all at the DCFC level, which are considered the fast chargers, to support the buses that we have listed there for that are currently coming under the EPA grant funding. Next slide. So over the years, we have actually been able to acquire quite a significant amount of grant funding and incentives. And with that, we have been very diligent in ensuring that any grant funding that we have acquired is stackable in most instances. So this is kind of a layout of the different, the number of buses procured, the dates that the years in which those vehicles arrived, the type of funding program that was used, the overall funding amount, but also including the district out-of-pocket expenses. So for instance, our first 7 buses, they arrived in early 2021. We got them through the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Fund. The total funding amount was $2.8 million, but the district only spent $220,000 out of pocket for all 7 buses. That's the equivalent of sales tax on the vehicles. And you can see going down the line, as we had to acquire additional vehicles, we were able to stack, for instance, AQMD funding with HVIP funding to only pay $30,000 for 2 buses in 2022. And in 23-24, we actually used only HVIP funding, which at one point in time when it came out, it was about 50% funding, but with inflation over time, it's more about 40% funding. So for those 8 buses, the district actually spent a little bit more out-of-pocket expenses to acquire those vehicles. And then we just recently acquired EPA funding that we are stacking with HVIP, but also our home to school grant funding that we receive in the state of California. So for those 17 buses, the district is expecting to pay $1.53 million, but overall funding provided to us is $5.57 million. That funding had a temporary pause at one point in time with recent administration in place. So we are expecting to receive those buses here in the very near future. Next slide. So it is very important when transitioning to electric that you consider that overall range anxiety that is going to be experienced amongst your employees within the fleet. You definitely have to consider multiple options. So conducting like a route design analysis is very, very important. You have to consider your climate impact, your hills. Even though these buses come with regenerative braking, it still is more impactful to put these buses on routes that service areas that are more hilly as opposed to your flat land. You have to consider the weather, running the AC and the heating, and what is the load amounts on those buses, and the dwell times that you're going to need in between with the types of charging infrastructure that you have to identify what is that charging range that you're going to need to be able to operate your morning and your afternoon routes, as well as your midday field trips or your evening sporting events. For instance, when we were only functioning with level 2 chargers before receiving any of our fast chargers on our recent infrastructure, we actually had most of our drivers pre-tripping 2 buses per day. They would pre-trip 1 bus and use it for their morning, but because that bus would not have enough time to charge in the middle of the day, we would have to actually allot them additional time to pre-trip a second bus so that way they could go on their afternoon route. We currently only use these buses on very local field trips because the range is something that you definitely have to consider. Battery management and range assessment is very important to monitor the state of your charge very closely using telematics, and your charging companies and vendors can be able to provide you those resources that we will talk about here a little bit later. You can also assess the battery health through scheduled maintenance checks. These buses being relatively new in our industry, it's still kind of a learning curve as to identify How long are these batteries going to actually last in these buses? Is it 7 years? Is it going to be 10 years? And what is that overall cost going to look like? There's a lot of batteries in these vehicles to operate them mounted to the chassis. And right now we're estimating about 150,000 per bus to actually replace those batteries when the time comes. And flexibility and adaptability. You have to build that into your scheduling. You have to have contingency routes. You have to incorporate your midday and charging where it's possible. Like Ramiro was saying earlier, there are other programs out there to actually install charging stations outside of just your regular bus yard or locations like that. And we are looking to expand into those different sectors and opportunities, and kind of installing charging stations in and around our district so our drivers have opportunities to charge while out there on the road, but also to open that to the public for additional revenue stream for our district. And you definitely need to consider your bus specifications, match the bus to the job. As these buses advance, we've noticed our first phase of electric buses do not get as much range as our second phase. First phase, for instance, is seeing about 80 miles to a full charge, where our second phase electric school buses are seeing closer to 100 to 110 miles to a full charge. Next slide. All right, driver and mechanic training. So we have worked very closely with Bluebird specifically, because all of our vehicles here that we've acquired for electric are through Bluebird. And so we have worked with them to come out and do hands-on driver training on the things that they're going to need to know. We've been sending them to professional growth trainings and opportunities that are available for them to learn more about these opportunities. In the state of California, we have an organization called CASTO. That stands for California Association of School Transportation Officials. They have a mechanic and vehicle maintenance supervisor conference every year where we can send our employees to learn specifically about these electric school buses and what it's going to take for them to really provide appropriate maintenance and scheduling on these actual vehicles. You need to familiarize your staff with infrastructure, the different types of charging systems that you have out there, and also getting that regular feedback and support. You know, the drivers are the experts, the mechanics are the experts out there working on these vehicles and driving them daily. So allowing them to help provide that data and that analytics of what they're experiencing on their routes is very important to help manage what is functioning and how we can maneuver the logistics of our day-to-day operations. Next slide. All right, so data and managed charging. We actually work with a company called Nuvi for our charging infrastructure. In most cases, the charging infrastructure will exceed the bid limit requirements within the state of California and with Ed Code. So we have to go out to bid whenever we acquire additional charging stations. And so Nuvi in this case has won the bid. And so we work with them. They have a system called Fleet Box. And it helps to monitor and manage our electric vehicles and chargers in real time. We gain effective oversight on our buses, and we can see detailed information about our assets. So this is an actual screenshot, a picture of the fast chargers that we currently have installed in our yard, but also a screenshot from the Fleet Box system that we can log into and identify when is a vehicle actually plugged in versus when is it charging, or is a charging station actually available for us to use. So this would be a snippet of what we see to be able to help manage that charging load. Next slide. Overall summary. So, we know that there's lots of things that we learn that we've been successful with, that we've had challenges with, and that we know that we can do better on moving forward. So we know that we've been able to achieve reduced emissions. we've achieved operational cost savings and improved overall rider experience. We do have some challenges. We still experience range limitations on our routes. We still have to manage the charging time between routes. In some cases, we are still pre-tripping more than one bus a day, but that has definitely helped now that we've acquired some fast chargers on our infrastructure. We do have space constraints with overall, there's so many batteries mounted to the chassis of these vehicles that there's no luggage compartments on the exterior of these vehicles in the same way that you have on internal combustion engines. So if you have a band going to a location, you're going to have to send an extra bus just to carry their equipment. So that's what we mean when we say space constraints. And overall driver monitoring and data utilization. It does take some time for the drivers to get used to these vehicles and understand that range capacity that they're dealing with. And some overall lessons learned is we've had to address infrastructure needs early on. So like Ramiro said, about 18 months in advance, make sure you're already communicating with your utility and scalability considerations. You need to really plan ahead, have your vehicle acquisition plan ready to go, and know where you want to go with your fleet and electrifying your fleet so you can be prepared for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Actually, I'm gonna ask you a really quick question that was in the chat. Such a great presentation. They say so informative. Are you open to having other districts reach out with questions?
Absolutely. I actually do I'm in contact with lots of districts all the time to answer their questions and to explain what we do here at Orange and how it's been successful for us or what we've learned and need to change moving forward. But yes, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Awesome. And I know that Desmond mentioned that he had to leave, but he also is a great resource for anybody looking to chat. All right, I'm gonna run through the next few slides about funding and resources, and then I'll leave quite a bit of time for questions. I know we got some questions in the chat in the Q&A, and then I believe everybody should be able to unmute if you want to like verbally ask them too. So real quick, just a quick thing about funding, and I know there's been a lot of talk about different funding approaches here. There's sort of 4 different buckets. There's like the traditional sources for capital, which is like bonds, levies, state level stuff. There's federal or state disbursements or allocations, and those have sort of different permutations underneath them. That also can include things like a state lottery. By the way, this is what I love most in schoolwork is this weird nitty gritty into funding. So if you have really nitty gritty questions, let's do it. Grants, rebates, and incentives, which can be federal, state, local, utility, et cetera. A lot of those have been touched on today. And then there's other procurement and financing options like energy services contracts, PPAs, et cetera. Those are also touched on today. And really the approach, I love this because this was sort of a through line throughout this whole thing. Really the best way to get these sort of larger scale projects or even the smaller scale projects funded is using funding stacking. And that is the process of just sort of like putting stuff on top of each other in a really creative way, like using a local bond with state matching funds, adding a utility incentive on there. I'll show a visual representation of this in a second, but really it just takes some creativity and teamwork. And I know some of our folks here talked about that today, to be able to use multiple funding sources to get to the, the end that you're looking for. So here's just one real quick example where this district refers to itself as tax averse and has not been able to pass a bond. So I fully know that that is not possible in many places. So bonds are great. If you can do it, go for it. If you can't, there are other options. So this district was able to use a low interest loan. It was actually, they refer to it as a farm loan because this is a rural community. So they were able to get effectively agriculture adjacent funds to fund this HVAC work. They were using ESSER funds, which I know are gone, but it's a federal level fund, and that was the elementary, secondary. I really should remember what that acronym stands for, but it was the COVID funds. And then they were also able to use some money from a state Department of Energy. So with that, they were able to do a pretty sizable HVAC project to help address air conditioning, IQ, do some lighting, and the filtration to handle wildfire smoke, which I know is very present, not just on the West Coast, but everywhere these days. So just a view of what that can look like. I'm going to sort of move past that a little bit and talk about some of the national funding opportunities that still exist. I know that things are a little shaken up. But the most exciting thing is that within the investment tax credit, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing, the ground source heat pump section 48 is still good to go. There's different retirement years, and I will show a slide in a second about the people that know a lot about that. That is sort of my one area that I like to defer to the experts. But it's just good for everybody to know that things like the solar and storage and the EV charging and the clean vehicles, and then the 179D, the incentive for reducing overall energy load, have changed and have different due dates. So there's still money to be had if you can act quickly, but just know that the dates have changed. However, the ground source heat pump, you can still get quite a bit of money back. So go for it if you're interested. I saw that there was a question about ground source in there. I'm going to shout out the people that know a lot about the real nitty gritties of the tax credits, because it's not me. I would love to know, but man, it is a whole puzzle. So our friends at Undaunted have done a lot of work around this. They have a schools hub related to this. So if you have questions, I think Gabby was on here. So thanks for introducing and saying hi, Gabby. She knows a lot about the tax credits too. So check them out. They have a whole schools hub related to that. But let's talk real quick about, I don't know why that link pasted in there twice, but I was clearly just really excited about the Desire database. So it's the database of state incentives and renewables for efficiency. This shows incentives and programs available at every single state. It's very, very wide, and it's more than just schools. So know that. You might get in there and there's like residential and other things. But I think this is an excellent database. It's desireusa.org. Obviously, state and local funding can also come from your utility. We've talked a lot about that today. One of the things I want to make sure to say is we heard this from we do different webinars and stuff with other school districts, and we heard from one of our school districts that they only really talk to their utility when something bad is happening. And that's not a great way to set up a relationship with someone who may have money for you or may be able to help you. So if you're a school district, or if you're, shoot, you could probably even do it in your home if you wanted to. Getting to know your utility is a really important approach to find funding, programs, and people to help you. They also know people like us who can help you, so that's cool. And then also there's match funding from state programs as another sort of state and local funding. There's different stuff in every state. You know, some folks like, I'm actually in Oregon, I should say. We have a great, we have the Energy Trust of Oregon that gives out incentives. You know, in New York, there's NYSERDA, which is another state level entity. California has a lot of stuff. There's different states that have different match funding or programs for you. One thing that we have done with SCE is put together this school funding and opportunities tracker. We are building it out every single day. So we put a lot of the information that was talked about here, stuff from SCE, stuff from all over the state of California. We've also started to put in some other state data in there, but our database is only as good as the people who have information or need it. So if you're like, I am in, I don't know, Maricopa County, Arizona, and I need to find some incentives, can you help me? Please reach out and we can add it to this database. So great resource for you all. Some other highlights from California specific is this KTEP program. They are zero interest loans. It's very exciting. Up to $3 million per application with a repayment over 15 years. And I know $3 million isn't like a huge amount of money in schools, but man, think of that funding stacking. You get the $3 million, you get, you know, another incentive from SCE or your local utility. You maybe get a small grant, and boom, there you go. You got a project. There's also this Proposition 2, which is, I wanted to highlight that one specifically because there's a new pot of money. It's like $330 million for small school districts for new construction and $400 million if it's modernization. So if you're a small, I can't remember if it's small rural, I think it's just small school districts can apply for those funds. So check out Proposition 2 as well. And thank you, Gabby, for putting information in the chat. I see that. Okay, that was like the quickest overview about funding stuff I've probably ever done. If you really want to get into the nitty-gritties, please reach out. Let's talk about it. But I'm going to just talk quickly about some of the resources available, but there's been so many today. So yes, slides will be shared and please reach out. But with SCE, we've been creating this webpage called Electrification Tools for Schools. That's where that funding tracker lives. There's a checklist and tips for grant writing for schools. We put that together with a bunch of other school districts who've been successful in grants, including federal grants. So that is a great one. There's also project required. There's templates in there. I saw that comment about an RFP template, and that is on my mind. to add to this page. So that's just one option. There's the link down there at the bottom, and we can drop that in the chat as well. On that web page, there's guides and roadmaps. There's this interactive cost dashboard, which is pretty cool. So if you're trying to look at different electrification systems and scenarios, it can sort of give you a cost approximation. There's a new fact sheet that we just did. That's a picture of it on the right-hand side there. The funding tracker, the checklist, and some templates. It's also found on the SCE webpage, so you can find it 2 different times if you need to. Give it a whirl. Here's the cost dashboard. I was talking about, we actually did this a year or so ago. I don't know, time isn't real anymore. At some point in the last year or two. But this is called the Building Electrification Technology Roadmap for Schools, and it comes with this interactive cost estimation tool. So give that a check out as well. I guess the date was on there, 2023. That was 2 years ago. Within that is also the school decarb toolkit. This is all on that website, so just check it out. I just wanted to sort of show you a visual representation. If you're like me, you have a hard time going to things unless you actually see what's on it. So there's a toolkit there as well for school decarb with different templates and a guide. Some of the templates that we've put together look like this. This is like project requirements with a nice little checklist. There's a couple of different templates for resolutions or policies, depending on which way your district chooses to go. And then I also wanted to highlight, this is not on that webpage, but these are new case studies for zero carbon schools. This is volume 3. It's cool because we've seen these go from volume 1, which if I remember right was like net zero, and they're really like changing and moving as we go through sort of the new iterations of these schools. So this is brought to you also by SCE, so give these a check. Thank you so much. Okay, bye Gabby, see you later. Thank you for dropping the links in the chat, Amy. And then, like I said, I kept saying, please reach out. So we have a help desk for school districts. So if you have questions, you just need someone to talk to, you need to figure some things out, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to help you with any of these topics, but that is by no means limited. So we can just have a chat and sort of think about what you might need to work through. And with that, I'm going to stop the share, and I think we go to Q&A. Sound great? All right. There's a whole mix of things in the chat, and I may try and have people talk if you want. So I see 2 in the actual Q&A that I think are both for Christina. So I don't know if Chad or Renee, if you guys want to ask them out loud. If not, I'm happy to just read them.
I think I already answered them too.
Oh, great.
Oh, did you? Okay, sorry, I stepped away. Was it in part of speaking or written? I didn't.
Go for it. We'll just answer them again, because then people who don't have access to the chat can hear the answer. So Renee, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious, what is the protocol for retiring diesel buses in the transition to go to EV? When I think about carbon, it's just always a curious thing, end of life.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
So when we use grant funding to replace our vehicles, typically the grant funding has stipulations and requirements that are requiring the district to salvage, crush, dismantle. Those are the 3 common words that are used. So in those situations, we usually have X amount of time following receipt of the new bus to actually show that that old diesel bus that met those qualifications was actually officially dismantled by an approved dismantler. So that means that they're cutting the engine data plate, they're cutting the bus literally in half and crushing it so that way it cannot be sold or used anywhere else within our state. So that's usually the requirements when you use certain grant funding. So the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Fund, the AQMD, and even with the EPA funding that we're going to be receiving, those are going to be the requirements. If we didn't use grant funding to purchase them, then we would probably auction. But you do have to be careful when you do that based on your Air Resources Board's requirements, because you never want a bus that you sold or auctioned to be used elsewhere when it doesn't meet the CARB regulations.
Thank you.
Great question. Great answer. I just learned so much just in that little 30 seconds. Another question for you, Christina, and then I'm going to move to a question or 2, I think, for Ramiro. Chad says, are you looking at vehicle to building or vehicle to grid opportunities to increase resilience and or peak shave building demand?
Yeah, so we at our school district, when we worked with Edison, we worked with the Charge Ready Transport Program, but it was an Edison built project. Therefore, we do not qualify for vehicle to grid credits. Our district chose to do that because it was less out of pocket expenses initially. When we were new to this project, we didn't know really what was going to be beneficial. So we actually chose the Edison built project. So therefore, we don't qualify for vehicle to grant credits. We do qualify for LCFS credits, and we work with Nuvi as our charging vendor. Nuvi has proprietary software that requires them to be the main broker to handle those LCFS credits. So we have agreements with them and we get paid out based on our usage on an annual basis. And we also work with Edison to ensure that we are not charging during peak hours. So from 4 to 9 p.m., we are off the charging window, I guess you could say. So that way we're most cost effective for our district.
Great. Ramiro, I'm going to ask you this one about EV chargers in public areas. How do you address concerns of cord vandalism and metal scrapper thief damage?
Yeah, so on that one, team, whenever it is a public access location, we do have the conversation with the customer. I know sometimes the customer, it would be up to them to mitigate that, but I've seen scenarios where customers are bringing in additional security, potentially increasing lighting, fencing parameters, cameras, signage. So I know that usually is used to deter, but I'm sure, Amy, if you might have any other insights that you might be to share with us.
No, I think I would just echo what you say, Romero. I think for the most part, for a lot of the fleet that we see out there and the buses, they're behind gates and locked up. We don't seem to have as many issues at high schools that even do have public charging for just standard passenger vehicles. Because again, a lot of those are not open 24/7. But I will say in a handful of the high schools that I worked with previously that have a handful of charging stations, fortunately for them, allowing the community and the neighborhood to be able to park there overnight, perhaps has been part of the reason it's been a little bit of a deterrent because there's activity there or people parked there. So it hasn't been as much of an issue, at least that I've heard about, but I'm sure it exists out there. I mean, there are mean people out there, so probably never going to get away from that. If there's something valuable there for them in terms of scrapping and making some money, but for the most part, I haven't had too many complaints about that.
Good question. I also have never heard the phrase metal scrapper thief before, so that's a good one. Andre, are you there by any chance?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, I have a question for you. Do you find that training is needed for kitchen staff on each individual type of electric kitchen equipment, or are some pretty intuitive, or can you sort of like learn one and then the rest of them sort of fall into that training? Tell us about the kitchen staff training.
Yeah, so most of the equipment is a one-for-one replacement. A convection oven is a convection oven. It has the same controls, thermostat, buttons, and like that. Probably the most appliance or category that would require training would be induction. The cadence of cooking, the proper pan and materials and things like that. But an oven, a steamer, a combination oven, retherm oven, they're basically the same from gas to electric. The training would be on induction. Only to, again, the cadence. Most people go to 100% with induction. You usually start about 50% and you work yourself up or down on it. So I would say the only category that would require any type of in-depth training would be induction.
Cool. Great answer. And then I have a question for the SCE folks. So I think anyone can answer this, but I might kick it to Amy first. Is SCE doing vehicle to grid work?
Yes, there's been lots of studies going on for vehicle to grid. We were doing it for a while as a pilot program with a high school on buses, and I know it's being on my side now. I don't have as much visibility up front, so I'll pass it to Romero after, but I know our programs team is doing a lot of strategy work to look to see what kind of either vehicle to grid or vehicle to building, how we could leverage those batteries more efficiently, what kind of work work can be done to offset a customer's bill rather than exporting back out to the grid for wholesale, which isn't quite as lucrative for business customers. So lots of options being explored.
And I would just say as well, team, so it is something that we consider vehicle to grid as a grid asset. So we are certainly working towards it. Now, our programs under Charge Ready Transport customer built option, or even Rule 29 would support that integration of the distributed energy resource. Right now, we're currently working through the tariff structure with the CPUC. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. So right now, I have had districts that have deployed V2G technology, but at the moment, they can only use it in one direction. So I would say that if you are doing that, we need to have an in-depth conversation that will make sure that we are structuring your project in a sense where you would be able to leverage that export once that tariff does come to fruition.
Oh, great answer. I know we're at time. Does anybody have any last dire questions? Otherwise, I think I'll let folks go for the day.
Appreciate everyone, and certainly all of our contact information will be listed in the presentation that we're sharing with you all. So please feel free to reach out to Riley or myself, and we can filter out the question that you have and get your answer back to the right individual. But we really appreciate everybody's participation today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Great presentation, y'all. See you in October.